Welcome to the place where the calls are always coming from inside the house. This is PseudoPod, the weekly horror podcast. Disturbing content follows now.
PseudoPod, episode 944, for October 25th, 2024. The House That Stands Over Your Grave, by Kyle Piper. Narrated by Peter Baravish. Hosted by Scott Campbell. Audio by Chelsea Davis. Hey everyone, hope you're all doing okay. It's Scott again, assistant editor at PseudoPod, your host for this week. And I'm excited to tell you that this week we have The House That Stands Over Your Grave by Kyle Piper. This story is a PseudoPod original. Kyle Piper is a Pacific Northwest-based writer and video essayist. When he's not imagining horrible things to write about, he's probably spending time with his wife and a strange animal purporting to be a cat, trying to get through to his emotionally closed-off pet box turtle, or playing weird video games in the 90s. He also writes about the weird video games, and you can find that content on his YouTube channel, Monster Closets. Your narrator, Peter Adrian Baravish, is an Indian-American musician, writer, editor, audio producer, and narrator. For these endeavors, he has won the Miller and British Fantasy Awards, and has been nominated for the Hugo, Ignite, and Aurora Awards. His interactive novel is forthcoming from Choice of Games, and his essay, Pearls from a Dark Cloud, Monsters in Persian Myth, is forthcoming in the OUP Handbook of Monsters in Classical Myth. When he isn't crafting, crooning, or consuming stories, Peter can usually be found hurtling down a mountain, sipping English breakfast tea, and sharpening his Farsi. You can read his sporadic ramblings at peteradrianbaravish.com. Now, check the batteries of your flashlight, because this house is a story for you, and we promise you, it's true.
The House That Stands Over Your Grave, by Kyle Piper. Narrated by Peter Adrian Baravish. The first time the topic of the old house on Gray Street comes up, Lou and Kennedy are working on their math homework on the floor of Lou's bedroom. It's the first time Kennedy has been over, and when she calls Lou's little two-bedroom rambler a nice house, he thinks it's a mean joke until she tells him how bad the place she just moved out of was. That brings up the topic of crappy houses. Kennedy's old apartment was infested with bees, Lou's older brother lost part of a finger helping their dad repair rot in the crawl space here, and eventually, Kennedy mentions the total wreck her dad had driven them past on Gray Street, behind the cemetery. That brings it out of Lou without so much as a thought to the credibility of the claim. Just, oh yeah, the haunted one? Now Kennedy looks like she's trying to stare a hole through his head, so she can determine approximately how much bullshit it houses. Did you... She starts cautiously. Have you seen any ghosts there? Oh, I've never been inside, but I mean, I walk pretty close by it all the time. It's super creepy. As he says this, Lou realizes how completely stupid it sounds, but he can't figure out how to express what he feels when he looks at that house through the jagged chain-link fence that separates its backyard from the cemetery where he so often stands. That crumbling stack of ivy-crowded wood looms over the back end of the graveyard, keeping watch over the little rectangles of eroding concrete that Lou doesn't think even count as gravestones. Unkempt vines and brush and pale pinkish mushrooms poke out through its backyard fence into the graveyard, as though the house itself is reaching out to claw at the world around it. He's sure it's why the back end of the cemetery is the cheap end. Anyone who can afford the big fancy headstones puts them up front where you can barely see the house and don't have to look at it when you visit. Lou knows that when he dies, his family and friends will have to stare at that decaying pile just like he does. I can definitely tell that it's creepy, Kennedy says. But my gym teacher is creepy. That doesn't mean he's a ghost. Okay, that's not what I meant. Literally, everyone who's gone in there has seen something weird. You can ask anyone who's done it. Like? Lou is sure he knows plenty, but can't come up with a single name on the spot. Well, I don't know, like a lot of people. What did they see? Kennedy asks. Ask around. There are some pretty fucked up stories. Kennedy does another one of those narrow-eyed stare-downs. Are you making fun of me? Trying to make me look like an idiot in front of everyone? Holy shit, no, I would never do that. He hopes the sincerity shows. By the encroaching end of 8th grade, Lou hasn't made many friends among his peers, but Kennedy moved here just a couple months ago. He's sure this is the only chance he'll have to get on her good side before she finds out how much of a weird jackass he is. A few days later, Kennedy brings up the house again. She's lying in the dead grass behind the faded yellow double-wide she lives in, casually pulling apart a dandelion, when she offers, apropos of nothing, "So, I asked some people about the house." Lou is hanging upside down from the tire swing, dangling off the one scraggly tree in the yard. He perks up. "What did you hear?" "A bunch of crap, mostly. Sounds to me like people are seeing things." "Hell yeah, they're seeing things." Lou pulls himself upright. "Fucking ghosts." "So it smells bad and makes weird noises and people see stuff." Kennedy sits up. "I remember my mom saying that mold and fungus can mess with your head, like make you feel weird and hallucinate. That's probably all it is." Lou thinks of those weird fleshy mushrooms that grow in the house's backyard, but shakes his head. There's no way fungus and mold can make you see an entire person standing right in front of you. Why not? I mean, my mom is full of shit, but that makes sense to me. Lou isn't really sure how to follow up on that mild overshare, so he doesn't. He has noted the lack of anyone going by the title of Mom at Kennedy's house, and can't bring himself to inquire, which just leaves the two of them in silence. He doesn't like the way Kennedy chooses to break it. "So when are we going?" she asks. Lou is painfully aware of how stupid he sounds as he slowly says, "What?" "To the house." "Why would we go?" Kennedy shrugs. "Why wouldn't we? If there's a ghost, I want to see it." "Ew, fuck that." Lou has no idea why he said ew, and he's starting to really regret ever having mentioned the ghost thing. Kennedy smiles and says, "That's fine. I'm definitely going, but you don't have to if you don't want to." And he knows she means it. Lou is actually pretty amazed by how reassuring she sounds, steering a wide course around the big, obvious topic at hand, which is that Lou is a total baby. He knows he is, and he's sure she knows he is, but unlike anyone else he's met, she never holds that against him. He'd been nervous to bring a girl over to his house for a while, and she had smiled and said that was fine. When she suggested they take honors classes together next year, and he had said he wasn't sure he could handle it, she smiled and said that was fine. Something in that particular smile makes her look more beautiful to him than anyone ever has, which somehow just makes him even more scared. On this occasion, it also makes him pretty sick of being no more than fine. "Well, whatever then, I'm going too," he announces, as boldly as he can manage. "You seriously don't have to." As much as he appreciates her still trying to offer him an out, it's too late. The hints of mischief and pride that creep into her expression trap him. It's a new and improved version of her approval that he finds himself immediately hooked on. "I'm not going to make you go alone." Her smile widens. He's on a roll. "Well, okay then," she says. "When do you want to go?" His rational mind fights back with renewed energy as he pushes it one step too far. "How about right now?" "Awesome!" Kennedy hops up to her feet and starts toward her house. "I'll go get flashlights." As she jogs away, Lou lets the veneer of confidence drop off his face and takes a moment to stew in his dread. As Lou leads Kennedy through the graveyard, he does his best to maintain composure. But that gets harder when they reach the top of the hill and the humble little headstones that occupy it. As they move alongside the lopsided fence at the back of the graveyard, the house starts to become visible through the gaps in the brambles poking through the chain link, and Lou feels its presence as it stands over them. He tries to keep his eyes off the headstones, and hopes Kennedy doesn't look too closely either. No matter how many times he's visited, he's never been able to fight back tears when he comes to his brother's grave, and he's not interested in letting Kennedy see him totally lose his shit trying to explain what happened with Brian. Despite his efforts, Lou can't help a glance at the headstone he's become so familiar with, and he notes with disgust that more of the mushrooms from beyond the fence have sprouted around it. It feels like a cruel insult from the house itself. There's a loose portion of fence just past Brian's grave, and Lou manages to swallow the rising lump in his throat long enough to crawl under and hold it up for Kennedy. The approach to the house's back porch is a minefield of broken glass bottles, cigarette butts, dried patches of tall grass, and a whole lot more of those gross mushrooms. Lou marches toward the ruin like he's about to charge into battle. He's come dangerously close to backing out already, and now he knows he's at the point of no return. He hasn't worked that hard not to cry in front of Kennedy, just to wimp out now. Kennedy examines the windows with intent to find an especially breakable-looking candidate, as the former popular entrance, a broken window along the side of the house near the front, has recently been sealed off with plywood by whoever still owns the place. From what Lou has heard, even the doors inside are largely nailed shut, so people using the windows have only had access to the front of the house and the upstairs. This makes Kennedy and Lou potential pioneers into the unexplored depths of the place, a fact Kennedy notes with excitement that Lou tries to feign in return. Lou is about to suggest checking out a cellar door he had seen around the other side, when Kennedy thinks to try the back door directly. A few boards block it off, but they're nailed across the framing and don't touch the door itself. The knob does not turn in the slightest, but with some pressure the door swings inward, chunks of the inner frame splitting away and falling to the floor. Kennedy gives a humph of approval and ducks down under the boards. Lou takes a breath of the stale air wafting out and follows her in. The smell lives up to its reputation. A dry, choking odor like dust and mold and ash assaults his nose, and each breath feels like sandpaper on his sinuses. The light pouring in from the open door and boarded windows is enough to dimly illuminate what's left of the room in which they now stand. The pale pink mushrooms are liberally peppered about the place and growing healthily, sprouting up from the floorboards and forming tiny shelves on the walls and beams. They are accompanied by a few invading vines from the yard, reaching in between the boards over the windows and crawling across the walls. Dried mud streaks the floor all around them, and piles of near-dissolved wood and rusted iron mark the places where furniture once stood. "Well, it sure as hell looks haunted," Kennedy says. "I feel like the ceiling's gonna collapse." Lou steps into the big bay window just to the right of the door and stares out between the boards at the yard and the cemetery beyond it. He realizes that from here, he can just barely see the nicer headstones at the bottom of the lot. So, Kennedy looks around at her damp, reeking surroundings. Is there some kind of story with this place? Oh yeah, pretty basic ghost story stuff. Lou is well versed in the local legend. Some rich asshole built it a long time ago for his pregnant wife, but she and the baby died in labor. Kennedy nods. Because all ghost stories are tragedies, right? And probably because doctors sucked in the past. Lou shrugs. There are a few different stories after that point. Basically, he was all tormented by guilt and stuff because his wife didn't want children in the first place. Some people say their ghosts drove him crazy and he killed himself, but I like the version where he gets all into occult shit trying to resurrect them and gets pulled into hell or something. Pretty metal. Either way, the spooky ending to the story is always that his wife and baby's graves are down with the fancy headstones at the bottom of the hill, and sometimes you can see his ghost standing right there in that window. Lou gestures back to the bay window he had just stepped away from, just staring down the hill at them. A strange feeling suddenly comes over him. It's an unexpectedly deep sympathy for this probably fictional character his classmates had cooked up, separated from his family even in death, always keeping his hopeless vigil. "Want to check out the basement?" Kennedy jolts Lou from his reverie. "What? Why? No one's been down there before, right? I want to be the first." Lou sighs before he remembers he's trying to act like he wants to be here. "Yeah, let's check it out." The door to the basement is just across the room from the back door, easily identifiable, as it has fallen off its hinges entirely, revealing stairs descending into darkness beyond. Actually, making that descent looks like it will be a more complicated matter. Ghosts or not, there's no way that's safe. Lou looks down at the rotted and mold-blackened boards that form the steps. Kennedy places a foot on the first step and applies a little weight. It bends as if made of thick rubber, but does not break. "Seems fine." Before Lou can protest, Kennedy flicks on her flashlight and starts sidling down the stairs, holding onto the handrail like it's a safety line on the side of a mountain. Every step gives off deep groaning and crunching sounds, but in only a few seconds she has safely completed her descent. She makes a quick sweep of her surroundings with her flashlight and looks back up. "Holy shit, Lou, this place is fucked up. You gotta see this." Lou has never paid much attention in church, but he's starting to feel like he should have. He apologetically includes this change of heart in the brief prayer he offers as he works his way down the stairs, and it seems to be enough. The ancient wood holds. Kennedy's description of the basement turns out to be accurate. On his way down, Lou sees that the walls and steps and handrails of the staircase are smeared with what looks like more dried mud, and that substance is also caked on the walls and floor below. The smell is even more intense here, and Lou's head is beginning to throb as he reaches the bottom of the stairs, but he becomes downright dizzy when he casts his narrow flashlight beam across the small concrete room. He's never seen fungus grow to such sizes as it does in the house on Gray Street. Enormous shelves of pale pink mushrooms hang on the walls, and clusters of the fleshy material the size of his head gather in the corners and in patches on the floor, all of it connected by wispy, root-like threads that run along the ground and reach down into cracks in the concrete. It occurs to him then just how much its surface looks like skin, and the sight and smell of it all makes him nauseous. What the fuck? Kennedy stares, her adventurous mood somewhat dimmed. Think they're the magic kind or the puke your guts out kind? They sure as hell don't look like the put on your pizza kind. From where they stand, the basement seems to be a sprawling labyrinth. There are multiple empty doorways leading off to other rooms, and Lou realizes that it probably matches his own entire house in square footage. Whoa, look at that. Kennedy stares down one of the open doorways. Lou looks down her flashlight beam into the next room where it casts its weak yellow light over the adjacent wall. The concrete there is not just cracked, but entirely crumbled away, leaving a chasm in the wall almost as tall as Lou. Moist earth blocks it up on the other side, and that dirt is marbled through by tiny strings of the resident fungus. Kennedy approaches the opening cautiously and squints at it. Lou follows at a distance. That's so weird, she says. Kennedy examines the hole for a minute and then looks back at Lou. As she does, her flashlight swings around to the other side of the room they've walked into, and a look of disgust crosses her face. Lou turns quickly and immediately gags. In the center of the room is an oozing pile of fungal growth longer than he is tall and nearly shin-high. It is by far the largest collection of the stuff they've seen, and tiny tendrils of it reach out in all directions, many of them snaking into the earth through the hole in the wall. Under the shaking glow of their flashlights, Lou almost convinces himself that he can see it gently throbbing. "Oh, no," is all he can say. He wants to look away, but he can't take his eyes off it. After a few moments of staring, Kennedy manages to say, Does that look like... She doesn't need to finish her thought. Lou sees it too. As he stares, his mind starts to make sense of the amorphous shape of the thing. It's like some hellish crime scene chalk outline, and once that thought occurs to him, Lou cannot unsee its vaguely humanoid form. "No," he lies. "There's no way." Kennedy seems determined not to discuss the resemblance any further. Lou isn't sure if it's the weak light or his imagination, but she looks a little queasy now. "I think I've had enough of the spooky house," she says. "All this mushroom shit might actually be poisonous or something. Can we go?" Lou would agree emphatically, even thank her for being the one to voice her concern first, but he finds that he cannot speak at all. He can only gape at the wall of soaked earth just past Kennedy's head, trying to form words as the soil slowly begins to bulge outward. Kennedy sees the terror manifesting on Lou's face and begins to mirror it as she stands perfectly still and watches him watch the wall behind her. The trance is broken when the first clump of dirt hits the concrete floor with a heavy slap. Kennedy does not turn to look. She charges forward, wrapping an arm around Lou, and drags him toward a pile of debris that had once been an old desk. They kill their lights and dive into the tiny space under the sloped desk, only two of its legs still standing. As they listen to more thick mud cascading out from the hole in the wall, Lou tries to make sense of what is happening. But for some reason, all he can think about are the earthquake drills at school. Get under the table and hold its legs with one hand, they always say. He's dizzy, and his heart is beating in a heavy, lurching way it never has before. Cover the back of your neck with your other hand, he remembers, and he does. Kennedy's fingernails are digging into the skin on his arm, and her breath casts waves of heat across his face. A new sound comes from the hole in the wall now, a deep, rasping exhale that seems to last forever. Heavy footfalls sound, dragging something ponderously forward, and with each sound, Lou becomes more certain that he will not live long enough to follow his teacher to the nearest exit and gather on the sports field. He can't believe that the footsteps have simply passed them by until he hears the sound of the basement stairs creaking one at a time. They sit in absolute silence for what could be 20 seconds or 20 minutes. When Kennedy clicks her flashlight on, it startles Lou so badly that he feels like all of his veins have tried to leap out of his skin. Tears are streaming down Kennedy's face, and she speaks in a whispered shout. "What the fuck was that?" she asks, as if he knows. Lou only shakes his head and stammers. Something like rage peeks out through the mask of terror Kennedy wears. She barely contains herself to a whisper. "You're fucking with me. You set this up." The denials, questions, exclamations, and constructive suggestions that are all trying to escape Lou's mouth at once get stuck in the door. He stares dumbly and begins to cry as well. This seems a sufficient denial on its own. The accusatory edge to Kennedy's expression fades and leaves only near manic fear, possibly magnified now. "Okay," she nods, trying to twist her face into a look of grim determination and getting only partway there. "Just follow me." She rises and traces the room with her flashlight. The soil-clogged hole in the wall is now concave, much of its contents spilled out on the floor. The black mud lies in a pile beneath it and outlines footprints leading to the staircase in the next room. Kennedy follows the prints, walking quietly. Lou does not move. He stands still and watches her peer around the stair railing up the flight. She waves him over. He's shaking uncontrollably now. He staggers forward, sure that he will fall on his face, but he makes it to the foot of the stairs. Kennedy is 2 steps up, still staring forward. The footprints mark each step, and a handprint clings to the wide, flat railing to Lou's left, fresh mud aligned with the dried streak Lou saw before. "We're just gonna run, okay?" Kennedy whispers. "Right to the back door." Lou shakes his head. He slurs and wonders if he's speaking too quietly or too loudly. "There's another door. We don't know if it'll open." "To the basement. I saw it, on the side of the house. It leads right outside." "Bullshit. I didn't see anything." "I swear." "I'm not running around in the basement looking for another door. We know where the back door is." "I can find it." Lou wishes he could grab her and drag her to it. "Please, just trust me." Kennedy looks down at him with frustration and urgency, but as she stares him down, her expression softens. "Are you sure?" "Trust me." Kennedy clenches her teeth and lets out a quiet sigh like a hiss. She nods. "Okay." As she reaches for the railing and starts back down, Kennedy's hand brushes the muddy print. She withdraws sharply and wipes her fingers on her pants, snapping the beam of her light onto the patch of wet soil. Lou looks closely at that handprint now and feels all the blood drain from his face as he does. It's small. Larger than his, but not quite the size of an adult's. And thin threads of the pink fungus trace through it. 4 of its 5 fingers are accounted for in full. The middle finger is missing its tip, and that is what pushes Lou over the edge. "No, no, no, no," is all he can say to express his thoughts. He thinks of the wiry fungus running through the handprint, through the house, through the soil and reaching out toward the graveyard, all the way out to the graves at the top of the hill. He thinks of the thing that climbed out of the black earth and marched upstairs, waiting for them just at the top of the steps. He thinks of too many things all at once and feels his body taking control of everything his mind no longer has the capacity for. His feet carry him backwards. His mouth keeps forming one word. "No, no, no." "What?" Kennedy is baffled. "Lou, what is it?" His chant, "No, no, no," is a prayer and a ward against the thing upstairs, a call to every version of God that might hear, asking that he will not have to see it and confirm what he already knows. He stops worrying about his volume then. He has to say it louder, shout it to everyone and everything that might hear. He has to be on record as having said in no uncertain terms to the thing upstairs, "No!" "Lou, shut the fuck up!" Lou cannot shut up, so he does the next best thing. He turns and runs. "Lou!" Kennedy reaches for him and takes a step, a sudden heavy step into the middle of a rotting board. Lou hears it crack, hears Kennedy's cry cut short as she strikes the concrete, sees her flashlight beam pirouette around the room as it sails away from her. He runs faster. Cold concrete, shelves stacked with rotting volumes titled in illegible Latin, shattered laboratory equipment, stone altars adorned with candles and cobwebs, and endless clusters of that awful fungus all blur past him as he charges forward. As big as the basement is, there are only so many rooms to run through, and he finds the short stairs quickly enough, outlined by thin shafts of light slicing through the wooden doors lying at a steep angle above him. He doesn't slow at all as he barrels up the stairs, shoulder first. The rusted chain and padlock hold, but the rotting wood does not. It splits, and sunlight washes over him like hot water. For the first time in what feels like hours, the air tastes like it's meant for human lungs. He pushes through the narrow alley against the fence at the side of the house, a dense blackberry thicket ripping at his clothes and skin as he forces his way through to the backyard. The fence is only 15 yards away, maybe 10. He only makes it halfway. It's a combination of the sunlight, the warm air, and simply the few moments that have passed since he lost control that give his mind a chance to catch up to his body and freeze him in place. He's in the tree again, the one he bet Brian he could climb up higher, listening to the sound of his older brother colliding with every branch he'd touched on the way up. He's frozen again, staring down at the broken body of the person he'd brought up there in another pitiful attempt to prove his bravery, one just as stupid as a visit to a haunted house. His hesitation lasts only moments. When he starts running back, he tells himself that this is the courage he's never had before, but he knows which thought had actually turned him around. He doesn't deserve to be the person who walks away again. It would take too long to go back around. He can't imagine forcing his way back through the blackberries or lifting the heavy cellar door from above, and Kennedy is just down those stairs, just a few strides beyond the back door, past the thing that crawled up from the basement. He can get by it without even having to look at it if he's quick. He can leap down the stairs to where Kennedy lies unconscious, get her up, drag her if he has to. He ducks the boards and passes into the half-light inside the house, ready to sprint for the basement door as soon as he's upright, but he freezes when he sees Kennedy across the room, already at the top of the basement stairs. She's crouched, half hidden behind the doorframe, staring back, not at Lou, but at the bay window just to his right. It takes him a moment to read the look of horror on her face and understand what's causing it, but by then, he can already feel the cold hand on his shoulder. It occurs to him that he should not turn to look, only after he has. The thing standing next to Lou is only a little taller than him, shorter than he remembers. Dirt or rot has painted it black from head to toe. Rags of a cheaply bought, poorly fitted suit still cling to it and hang off its body. Lou doesn't know if there's any flesh on it at all, or if what he sees plastered onto its bones is no more than soil and the flesh-colored fungus that wraps around and tunnels through it. It turns slowly from the window it had been staring out, the window that has the slightest view of the graves at the bottom of the hill, and fixes its gaze on Lou. A long, gurgling sigh escapes its opening jaw, its breath a wispy pink cloud that Lou's gasp of terror draws into his lungs. It stares down at him through empty sockets as the corrupted air burns its way down his throat, tasting like the house's choking stench, like rotting flesh, and like blood. He feels other hands around his arm then, the warmth of Kennedy's grasp shaking him out of his stupor and dragging him away from the creature in front of him. It either cannot or does not keep its grip, instead watching placidly, sadly even, as they slide away from it and through the door in what feels like slow motion, the world spinning wildly around Lou. As they duck under the boards, Lou tries to take a deep breath of the clean air outside, but can only feel the heavy atmosphere of the house in his lungs. The next breath he tries doesn't come easily, and the breath after that doesn't come at all. He does not know if his legs are moving or if Kennedy is carrying him away from the house. He isn't sure what side of the fence he's on when he hits the ground. Kennedy kneels over him as he coughs and gasps. Her face looks farther and farther away as black smog crawls across his vision and bright flashes pop in and out around him. He sees her screaming his name, but he does not hear her. Tears flow from her eyes and fall to his face, and as his vision fades, he decides that he always thinks she's beautiful, even when she isn't smiling. Time seems to pass slower in small towns. Kennedy used to prefer them for that reason, but now it only stretches out every day, week, and month in this place that she just wants to end. They had moved from every other rambler, trailer, apartment, townhome, or whatever before this one, and she knows they'll move again eventually. She only hopes it will be soon. She had expected to be ostracized entirely after what happened, but she was amazed by the sympathy and credulity with which the other kids received her full story, and a censored version played well with the adults. Lou had been right that everyone agrees about the house on Gray Street, but their pity is little comfort. The incident will define her in their eyes for as long as she stays. It makes her want nothing more than to be gone. Lou's parents ask that she not attend the funeral, and she thinks that's for the best. Anaphylaxis caused by mold or fungus in the house is the official cause of death, but Kennedy knows better. She killed him, as surely as if she had choked him herself. Fear and guilt hold a tight competition in keeping her away from the grave, but it doesn't take long for her to push both of them down long enough to make her first visit. There, she imagines all the days Lou spent in the shadow of the house that stands over his brother's grave, and understands his fear of the place in a way she wishes she had before. She also sees, among the flowers, photographs, and dead candles, a framed picture standing in between Lou and Brian's graves. It shows the two brothers standing together, smiling, Brian's left arm wrapped around Lou's shoulders. His fingers hang over the Garish Band logo on Lou's t-shirt, and Kennedy stares for a long time at the missing tip of the middle finger. She makes a regular habit of visiting after that, trying harder and harder not to look at the house, to pretend it was never there at all. It takes a while, but she works out a schedule for her visits based on the regular efforts of the groundskeepers. It's usually Tuesdays or Wednesdays that they mow the lawn and cut away the overgrowth reaching out from the fence in the back. Kennedy comes only after they do this, so that she doesn't have to see the creeping foliage that seems to reach farther and farther into the graveyard each week. This way, she can avoid the tiny clusters of pale pink mushrooms that poke through the fence and sprout out of Lou and Brian's graves, and others around them. Every week, the groundskeepers pluck them from the soil and throw them away to rot. Every week, they come back, sprouting just a little farther down the hill.
Well done. You survived another story. What did you think of The House That Stands Over Your Grave by Kyle Piper? If you're a Patreon subscriber, we encourage you to pop over to our Discord channel and tell us. This is what Kyle said about the story. Quote, "For as universal as it is, I find it weirdly difficult to explain grief in a way that feels satisfying. It is a slippery, nebulous thing. It can hide from you or disguise itself, look like one thing on the surface while growing into something else underneath. It can reach out for the people around you, blending with their grief, cross-pollinating and mutually mutating, and that process isn't always a balanced one. There's an ugly economics to grief. Some people are more vulnerable to it, while others have the means to withstand it better, find support more easily, or at least express it louder. Your background, personality, and a million other things, you can't even see all flavor and manifestation of grief that's unique to you. But whatever form it takes, it's such a vast, amorphous thing that attempts to describe it always seem to miss some crucial aspect. I've carried some of my own for a while now. I'm still trying to figure out how best to describe it. This story is an attempt at that." End quote. Grief, as described here, is a monster. The best or worst monsters are ones that are nebulous and amorphous. You might get some clarification on its looks or motivations, but you never completely understand it. Since you can't completely understand it, dealing with grief can be that much harder. Have you healed your grief? Or are you just trying to avoid it? Lou definitely hasn't dealt with his grief, but he manages day by day, till Bev and the haunted house open up that wound and all that pain and guilt empties out, leaving nothing. For some people, the monster is all they have in their life. This is true terror. On to the subject of subscribing and support. PseudoPod is funded by you, our listeners, and we are formally a non-profit. One-time donations are gratefully received and much appreciated. But what really makes a difference is subscribing. A $5 monthly Patreon donation gives us more than just money. It gives us stability, reliability, and dependability. And it will maintain tower from which to operate. And trust us, you want that as much as we do. If you can, please go to pseudopod.org and sign up by clicking on Feed the Pod. If you have any questions about how to support EA and ways to give, please reach out to us at donations@escapeartist.net. If you can't support us financially, then please consider leaving reviews of our episodes, or generally talking about them on whichever form of social media you can't stay away from this week. We now have a Blue Sky account, and we'd love to see you there. Really, please go to Blue Sky. Find us at pseudopod.org. If you like merch, you can support us by buying hoodies, t-shirts, and other bits and pieces from the Escape Artist Void merch store. Link is in various places, including our pinned tweet. PseudoPod is a part of Escape Artists Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit, and this episode is distributed under the Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Non-Derivatives 4.0 International License. Download and listen to this episode on any device you like, but don't change or sell it. Theme music is by permission of Anger's Manga. And finally, PseudoPod and the ghost hosts of the Haunted Mansion know, actually, we have 999 happy haunts here. But there's always room for 1,000. Any volunteers? See you soon, folks. Take care. Stay safe.
An arm appeared from nowhere on the shape, seemingly projected like the pseudopod of a protozoan.
It's a pseudopod. It's a big foot.
It's all about podcasts these days.